Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Zarif claims the international community has had enough of Washington's political vendetta against Tehran. Tantrums and capped tweets won't change the fact that the world is sick and tired of US unilateralism, he said. He added, stopping US trade and killing 100,000 US jobs is fine with us, but the world won't follow impulsive, tweeted diktats. Just ask the European Union, Russia, China, and dozens of our other trading partners. Minister Zarif's statement was in response to the American president's attempt to bully other nations into following his lead and stop doing business with Tehran. Anyone doing business with Iran will not be doing business with the United States. I am asking for world peace, nothing less, he claimed. His warning was apparently addressed to the European Union, but the EU is in fact legislating to ban companies from complying with his US sanctions or court rulings, offering compensation for any damage America does to European trade. Iran remains committed to the nuclear deal on condition that other governments continue trade with Iran and give Iran access to the international market. Russia and China have actively rejected the US sanctions, pledging to maintain trade ties with Iran. The other signatories to the nuclear deal show no signs of following Washington's sanctions either. And so the general public watches on as the American president stands alone in trying to stall the progress made on nuclear matters in recent years. How should we view America's rejection of an agreed nuclear deal? And are the sanctions imposed against Iran by the US even legal? Simple questions with important answers. What does the public think of Donald Trump's hostile approach in politics? And how does this affect world peace? We asked them. Here's what they said.
I think his probably arrogant attitude doesn't help. It winds people up and alienates groups. And I would say as a general kind of view in it, he makes things more difficult and slightly more scary.
Not at all. I think it's causing a lot of harm around the world, actually. I think he is creating a sort of a really nasty kind of political forum around the world, irritating people.
I think he's quite proactive. I mean, he's obviously gone to countries and he's taking a hard line with Russia over things, and he's been firm. He's honest. I mean, everybody might hate him, but he's done everything he said he was going to do. You can't act surprised when he suddenly imposes all these things that you voted for him for, when he said that's what he was going to do in the first place.
In a crazy way he is and he isn't, because he does approach it with a lot of confidence, but I think some of his like what he plans to do is a bit crazy, like building a wall and stuff down in Mexico, and that is madness. That's I think I can't really pass a judgment on him because I kind of don't really like him.
Well, I think he's a disaster personally, and I think it's a very sad way the world's going, and I think he's dangerous, and I really worry actually for the future with him.
It's clear that Mr. Trump has become a security menace to the world, not only to Iran, but also to his own allies. Even Europe is complaining about the way he is directing the US policies. I think he has given rise to the far right, and Europe itself is at war within itself because of these new policies. This is what is called the populism approach to politics, which means that you are inciting the natural or the distinctive and evil feelings of the people in order to make out of them public policies. And this is dangerous because you are not controlling the feelings and emotions of the people, but you are just giving rise to them and leaving them to do the work in the street, which is dangerous to the traditional politics.
Well, Mr. Trump keeps on talking about that he wants world peace. His sort of recent tweet, when he wrote it in capital letters, that actually shows that he, in reality, doesn't want peace. And of course, the other angle is that USA, whether it's Trump or previous presidents going back to last 100 years, have never really wanted peace on this planet. The only thing is that perhaps the language that Mr. Trump uses is a lot more colorful, a lot more vulgar, and really which normal people would not even use in a daily sort of communication. So when he talks about peace, I think the first thing that he should do is stop bombing, supplying armaments to Saudi Arabia and other regimes that are inflicting pain and horror on the countries in the Middle East. So, peace doesn't mean anything to him at all, as far as I'm concerned.
How does the public view Washington's decision to pull out of the Iran nuclear agreement, known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action?
Probably makes them even more isolated, kind of not in the whole worldwide community. And my sense with Trump all the time is he's doing stuff which is quite extreme to get a reaction or to start negotiation. But my gut feel without knowing the ins and outs is it probably feels like the wrong move.
Well, for starters, I think he seems to pull out of anything that had to do with Obama. He's making a point of saying, everything that Obama did was wrong, and I'm going to fix it. And it's almost like being childish. I don't want to play that game. I'm not going to do it. I didn't invent it. And I think, again, it wasn't the strongest sort of relationship that we've had with Iran, but it was a relationship. And this sort of definitely says, something to the world that, I'm not going to play, I'm not going to play your game. I'm going to do something different.
I think he has to do what's best for the country. And I don't think it's a personal thing. I think he's genuinely doing what he thinks is the best thing for America.
And that's stupid. That's just telling everyone else that he's making them or something. He's just the man could start World War III tomorrow morning if he wants.
I think it's deeply worrying. I think Obama was a great thing for world peace, and I think he's just the antithesis of that. So the world is going to be a more dangerous place.
Well, it is clear that those who were partners to that treaty, to that agreement, mainly the 5 other countries, were unhappy. They have, even after he has introduced sanctions on Iran, they issued a statement condemning, saying that this is not the way to conduct international politics. You cannot agree and sign an agreement today and scrap it tomorrow, because that really dilutes the confidence and erases the confidence of the public in the international institutions. You have to abide by whatever you sign in order for the people of the world to have confidence in the collective work within the United Nations. What Mr. Trump has done is a serious blow to those efforts that have grown up and developed after the Second World War.
Well, there are two sort of debates, two angles to this. One is that he wants to overturn whatever the previous president, Mr. Obama, did, whether it's the sort of international trade deals or the nuclear agreement between Iran or pulling out of the climate agreement. So really, he wants to put his imprint. That's one angle. But I think the reality is more profound than that. He wants to support what I call the unholy trinity in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Israel and the USA together, so that they can continue with their heinous crimes which are being committed in Yemen, or the support of the terrorists in Iraq and Syria. So it's a continuous sort of effort which the USA is doing. And really, at the end of the day, it's not the nuclear deal, it's Iran. Whether there was no nuclear issue on the table, Iran will always be targeted. So I think it's quite disingenuous for the USA to say that it's the nuclear issue that we are pulling out. It's really regime change that USA has always wanted since the advent of the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979.
The Iranian foreign minister says talks with insincere America are impossible due to its erratic policies. What are the public's thoughts?
Just from looking from afar would be that if I look at the other stuff that he does, my sense that he probably brings that mindset and attitude into all negotiations. So there's probably some massive amount of middle ground that could be found.
Well, how can you do business with that? How can you do business with somebody that's so egotistical and so hell-bent on doing what he wants to do, regardless of what's good for the greater world, what's just good for him? And I mean, obviously, it's gone, really well in America. If you actually, unfortunately, if you look at their politics, they're doing really well. The economy's booming, etc., etc., but to the detriment of everyone else. It's just thinking about themselves and no one else. And I think it has got to the point where he can't do agreements with anybody because it's my way or the byway. He only wants to do it his way.
I think he probably is quite spontaneous, but again, I think he's probably trying to do what he thinks is best, and he might not go about it the best way, but I think that in his mind he just wants to make it a better country.
You might be right. You might be right. I wouldn't do anything with that man. I wouldn't even go fishing with him. I mind going to politics with him. Christ, crazy man. Yeah, I wouldn't. I think the guy is right. The guy's right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd completely agree with that, to be honest. I think he shoots from the hip. That's his style of politics, and he says things first, and then he sort of seems to think afterwards. I think it's a dangerous way. Maybe it works in business, but I think it's a dangerous way to behave in politics, personally.
Well, any other politician will think the same. Look at the man in John On-young or in North Korea. He is not happy. He has given up He is now saying that I'm not giving up my nuclear arsenal because you give up your side, you abide by your part or your side of the agreement, but the other party does not. So it is a chaotic situation. You can only go into agreement with those who will respect any agreement that you agree with, yet you sign together. But if one party is not ready to abide by it, then what is the use of going into negotiations with a party that does not uphold the mutual agreements among partners?
Well, I don't think, not only is it erratic, but it's completely irrational. On the one hand, USA says that it's going to apply even more sanctions on Iran. I think Iran has admirably coped with all kinds of sanctions for the last 39 years since the Islamic Revolution took foundations in that part of the world. There was an 8-year war that was inflicted on Iran via use of Saddam Hussein in Iraq, and continuously there have been sanctions on Iran. So the new sanctions, whether they're going to hurt Iran or not, is an open debate, because Iran has got its own trading partners, Russia, China, India. China has quite categorically said that they're not going to abide by the rulings that USA wants it to do. And the European Union itself is not very happy and comfortable with following the US line on sanctions on Iran.
Beijing has close economic and diplomatic ties with Tehran. It is Iran's biggest oil customer, taking in more than 650,000 barrels per day from the country. The European Union imports and exports about 21 billion euros worth of goods and services with Iran, while America has only 180 million euros of trade per year. That's another practical reason why, amongst the nuclear deal signatories, the sanctions have been rejected by 5-1. Does the British public regard the unilateral sanctions imposed by the US on Iran as fair or even legal?
My feeling is it's just, putting out of deals that have been, Obama seemed to me to be like, a much more reasoned kind of guy. So the fact that Trump, just in everything he seems to be involved with, seems to be just taking an extreme position, makes me feel that, you know, probably the other five are right and he's probably wrong.
Imposing sanctions all by yourself, it doesn't have the same sort of gravitas as everyone doing it. We're all together saying, right, you're not going to do this. But him just doing it by himself, again, it's that we're so superior, America's so superior, that if we do it, everyone's going to listen. And of course people do, because, you know, they are such a big, powerful nation. But I don't think it has the same sort of value as everyone doing it together, you know, all standing together.
I don't know. I mean, obviously you've got, like, we're all supposed to be in it together to a degree, but in the same way that we want Brexit, sometimes you just have to go it alone and do what's best for yourself as a country.
Putting all these embargoes out there for no reason, really. I mean, it's just making the world a more hostile place again. Like when, like his predecessors have worked so hard to get to that a good relationship standard in war and stuff like that. So, yeah, I think Trump's been a bit of an idiot there, hasn't he? But
I think it's a mistake. I don't know about the legality of it, but I think it's a big mistake. And I think the US is obviously, it's a big country, it's got a big influence. But I think it's a shame that other countries can't put more pressure on him not to do that. He doesn't seem to take any notice, really.
Well, unilateralism is usually not productive, and it is not welcome. And the Europeans have, for some time now, been pushing the Americans to avoid unilateralism, to come back to the collective work of the human community. Now, this unilateral decision by America, well, whether it will work or not, definitely it will have part of it will work, because they are in charge of the international economic institutions. But at the same time, it depends on whether the other partners are themselves ready to abide and uphold that agreement. If they do not follow the Americans, then the American action will only have part success. Because if Europe says, no, we are not going to abide by that, we are not going to stop our agreements and our contracts with Iran, then the Americans will be left alone. So it all depends on the stance by Russia, China, Germany, Britain, and France. And I hope that they will continue to abide by that agreement, because otherwise the international politics will become just a laughing stock.
Well, neither are they fair or legal, to state that categorically. I think the issue is more than being fair and just. The reality is that Mr. Trump's slogan during the elections was America first. What it's really leading is to his America in isolation now, because the world is realizing the hubris coming out of Washington. The world is realizing the madness coming out of Washington. The world is realizing that really, at the end of the day, yes, okay, you know, people talk about in economic terms that USA is a big market and US consumers are the ones that fuel the world economy. But the reality is that the world is a bigger place. There are other larger populations on this planet which could easily trade with each other. And the BRIC countries themselves, as you know, have made one block. Then you've got the countries in the Far East and the Middle East. So I think in due course it will be very clear that America is actually shooting itself in the foot.
China, Russia and other nations confirmed their continued opposition to these sanctions. Does the public think Europe would follow through with the sanctions imposed by Trump's government, and why?
I think he'll try. I'm sure he'll try, but my sense is that I hope that we would stand firm. That said, I don't quite know where Brexit kind of comes into that as well, so that's really complicated. I'd love to think that Europe would stand firm and do what it wants to do, rather than be pushed into position by him.
I think if you look at everything that's happened, over the last few years politically, we thought Brexit wasn't going to happen. We thought Trump wasn't going to get in. I think you could say, yeah, it's not going to happen, but anything can happen at the moment. I think the political sort of forum has changed so much over the last few years that what you thought was never going to happen could possibly happen. So yeah, it could possibly happen. I would hope not. And quite frankly, they're in our backyard, not his. So I think we have a lot more to lose if we don't play ball with them.
I don't think anybody should be pushed or bullied into anything they don't want to do. If he wants to do that, then that's fine. But Europe has to do what's best for Europe.
I think he heard a statement that he made to Theresa May the other day to sue the European market for all these kind of sanctions that they're kind of putting in place when the Brexit happens. But I think that Trump is actually as crazy as Theresa May, so maybe they both will actually come together and, I don't know, probably will end up filing that lawsuit and follow America. I think Britain might actually pull out the same way America, or no?
I don't think he should, and I don't think he will. But I think it's a sad thing that we're not going to be part of Europe anymore. So, I think we should be sticking with our allies, really, and the more of us there are, the stronger we are against him, really.
Well, it is in the interest of Europe to uphold this agreement. It is in the interest of the world. It is in the interest of the region, because that is an example. It should be created and considered as a working example of the use of the collective negotiations among the members of the United Nations. Now, Europe knows and is aware that if that doesn't hold, then what is going to happen with later will be more dangerous. For example, if in Europe the far right rises to power, which is a real threat, because they have already reached high status in several countries like Poland and Italy and even in Germany, some Nazi members of parliament now have risen up. Now they know that if that agreement does not stick, then the consequences will be catastrophic to everyone, including Europe. Europe wants to live in peace, but that peace can only be secured if it is in agreement with the whole world, including the United States.
I think with Europe, it's the deep sea and the hard rock place, if you like. Europe, on the one hand, wants to continue doing business with Iran, but then there are multinational corporations that operate in Europe, like Total, your car manufacturers, the banking and the financial services sector in Europe, which has exposure to USA. And that's the fear of the MNCs on a regular basis, that if they do business with Iran, they would be penalized because of their exposure in the USA. However, I think an interesting development which has taken place in the last few days is that Federica, the spokesperson, the foreign spokesman for the European Union, and her assistant has said that if the European companies follow the US line, they could be penalized by the European Union themselves. So the large companies have that sort of, dichotomy at this moment, where to go. But I think the interesting aspect is that the SME sector, the small to medium enterprises, they may continue to do business with Iran because they don't have any exposure in the USA.
In a tweet, Donald Trump described the fresh US sanctions against Tehran as the most biting sanctions ever, warning that the countries doing business with Iran will be prevented from trading with the United States. The president seems unconcerned about the fairness or legality of his actions.
But others do care. Britain, Germany and France have attacked the new US sanctions and are actively protecting firms which trade with Tehran. North Korea's foreign minister summed up Trump's decision as a wrong move which breaks international law. In a strange irony, the world watches on to see if President Trump will follow the sensible advice of North Korea, or if Washington prefers instead to face isolation as the rogue nuclear state of the West.